my dad's spiritual path was very much, as I said, became a Buddhist, and he was interested. Um, he was very, he loves Asia. He was like, he's been drawn to Asia since he was young. He went to Vietnam to teach before he went to Vietnam as a soldier. And so he took me there as well, like, at 13 to see, um, some of the history from the Vietnam War, and as well as Cambodia, to the history of the killing fields and whatnot. So I think from an early age, from about 9, 10, I started to have like, spiritual awakenings to, you could say, like, maybe I never was never asleep, but like I became very like spiritually awakened to the contrast between um, these worlds, right? The so-called third world and first world. And, the ease by which, you could see, someone die. Like I remember, I think we saw like a baby die in the streets and, in India, and it's like, or people starving in Africa. And it's like, you see the contrast of how people are living, right? Where you
Mm.
have um, such like a visceral relationship to life and death, whether it be in war zones or
Right.
places where there's famine or there's extreme poverty. And then, you're in LA culture and going to high school where it's just like people are, they're kids. They don't really know much about what's going on in the world, or even at college. I remember just like coming from like, I was working for an NGO in Africa and at 16, and then coming back and 9/11 happens. And I'm like, okay, I mean, this stuff happens every day, around the world. There's bombings, there's
Yes.
death, there's terror, there's these things that exist. And it was like a wake up call for Americans. But for me, it was just like the rest. It was kind of like that which I knew exists abroad was coming home, and we have to face death. And I think that's really kind of the one of the key issues that I felt was an inability to kind of face some realities of death and trauma, and and have a spiritual relationship to these things, not from a like a materialistic perspective or like a fear, but just as an acceptance reality of it. So that was pretty much, yeah. I mean, the starkness of like these different realities that I understood from an early age, and have always have always been curious about. I've always delved into these topics of what is what's beyond our world, and opening up to the multidimensional reality that exists.
Yes. Yes. Have you ever felt your mental health was being challenged in any way?
I mean, definitely I mean, I think, yeah, definitely. High school was tough for me in many ways. Um, Going through a lot of the just
And I mean, with all those, this
yeah,
spiritual awakening, sometimes things
yeah.
are.
Well, yeah. I mean, for me, I think if the beginning of it was really just not really knowing how to fit into the modality of like the high school or the college life. And I think it was very hard for me to fit in. I felt very much an outsider to it. At the same time, I always like had like a kind of my own sense of my path and what I wanted to do. And by the time I went to college, I didn't really like feel like I fit into the like I wasn't going to go into the establishment, even though I went to an Ivy League school. It was like, I could have gone to law school. I just was like, this isn't my path.
Mm.
I'm just gonna have to kind of walk my own thing. And after college, I ended up going to these, exploring these haunted mental hospitals and very like dark places, because I was curious. I was curious, like, what is out there.
Mm.
What's what exists in this world? Ghosts, demons, angels, you name it.
Yeah.
Extraterrestrials, extra dimensionals. All these things I started to research and then experience in my own way. And so that was, yeah, I mean, I think I had a very, real dark nights of the soul. And during that journey, nearly drove me to suicide at one point when it got really dark in the first stages of going into those dark places and not knowing how to really protect myself. And then it deepened,
I'm sure nobody
basically.
knows
Uh,
when.
well, yeah, you have to figure out like how to protect yourself spiritually and find a deep faith, which I think was a big part of my first initiation, was like really finding my faith, finding a deep connection to my soul, and knowing, recognizing the light of my soul that is the only light that exists when you go into real dark, into true darkness, right? So that was a very challenging time. And I would say, yeah, I mean, for the most part, between 2001 and 2012, it was a dark night for, I think, for America, for maybe for the world, but definitely for America. The war on terror was symbolic of the terror that was like created, I think, in our own psyches. We were basically fighting ghosts in a way,
Yeah,
and
yes.
and I was experiencing it in my own right. And so I would say by 2012 there was a shift, and it wasn't the end of the world of like that, you could see visibly, but like in consciousness something really shifted. And post 2012, I feel like there was like like a rising of the light. And so that was, how do you say, I don't think I was for me it was never as dark. um
Mhm.
Even during COVID, it was just like, okay, this is a fear virus, and even more people woke up. And so it's like, since then, whenever it gets dark, it's just another opportunity to find more light.
Yeah, that's so nice. I couldn't agree more. Sean, can you please tell me your experience with all those, haunted places? I'm so curious to learn. Can you share?
I couldn't even tell you in a sitting. I mean, it literally would take, um, it's like trying to encapsulate years of
Mhm,
of of work. My film Greystone Park, which I released in 2012, does symbolically give you a sense, because it's based on these experiences of how, at heart, our frequency, our mind is like a labyrinth, right? And so the story was about this journey into Greystone, but really it was a metaphor for like a journey into the mind, and how we can see shadows everywhere, but they're really just reflections of our own fear. And the more like we go into fear, into confusion and fear, um the more that obviously, like the more shadows become animated, they become alive, right? They have more power over us, and they create. So it's like this cycle of fear, and fear begetting more fear. And so that story was kind of a darker story, because that was what I was trying to convey, was just how much, um, fear manifests. And then, since then, I think my story has been more about, um, overcoming the fear. And I think that's really the point of, every human journey, right? We, as souls, incarnate here into a realm that, appears like appears real, but we know from
yes.
quantum physics and whatnot, and I think it's being exposed more and more, that this is not a real experience. People are talking about it as like a simulation, or a holographic simulation.
Mhm,
We know that there's non-local action, right? That we can consciousness connects non-locally, right? That's why people can remote view things from,
or
thousands of miles away, or have intuition, or see things dimensionally. And so, as we understand that, like, this journey into the physical is for a very important reason, of, yeah, we're experiencing this illusion of physicality, that is a reflection of what our soul needs to experience, right? So that we can ultimately overcome our fears. And by overcoming our fears, I think rise in terms of our light, in terms of our consciousness, and then, you know, through the lifetimes, because I believe this is a work of many lives. This is not just one lifetime.
yes.
This
Yeah,
incarnation process of many lifetimes is really about awakening to the truth of who we are. And the more that we face our fears and overcome our fears, right, and let go of our fears, then we can ascend back to a more, I think, um, energetically attuned place, right, where we understand that we are able to manifest so much based on our energy, right? So the more we let go of our fears or face them, the more we're then able to like work just purely with energy. And that's where I think we're heading,